Are y'all ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Turn to Enoch 6 and 7. We'll also be looking in Genesis 6, among other places. Because it's been several weeks, I think some review is in order. I think we need to restate some things before we move on, refresh our memories of some necessary facts, and so that's what I want to do today. Pardon me. Let me begin by saying that the book of Enoch has been put in what is called the Apocrypha writings. The Greek word from which we get our English word Apocrypha means to hide away. So when we refer to the Apocrypha books, we're not talking about books that we discovered and want to add to the Holy Scriptures. When we're talking about writings that once, what we are talking about is writings that were once in the Holy Scriptures, but were taken out and hidden away. Remember, Apocrypha means to hide away. So we're not talking about books we want to add to the Holy Scriptures. We're talking about books that once were in them, but were taken out and hidden away. Some of them are removed and hidden away in the 1800s and early 1900s. Some further back than that, from the 1st century to the 4th century. Religious leaders, whoever that might be, and church fathers, and when I use those words, church fathers, I mostly do so with some disdain. But they decided that they should canonize the Holy Scriptures and that they should determine what should be in it and what should not be in it. So they took some things out and hid them away. The point being is this: when you think about the book of Enoch and Jubilees and some of these other things, they once were considered to be part of Holy Scripture. But then they were taken out and then they were hidden. Because they were hidden away and because people have been conditioned by the church to believe that they are either insignificant or dangerous. People have been conditioned by the church to believe that these books are either insignificant, and many of them have been taught that they're dangerous. Because of that, before we can actually teach on them, we have to convince hearers that they should be read, they should be studied, and they should be taught. So here's what I'm going to endeavor to do today. It's my hope that we can read some of the things written in the Apocryphal books, particularly Enoch, Jubilees, perhaps some out of Jasher, and then go back to what we call our Bible that has been reduced to 66 books, and see that the books we're reading out of, called the Apocrypha, that the books that were hidden from us were not hidden because they contradict the Bible.
Right.
We've done some of this already, but I feel it necessary to reaffirm those things today. We need to see that the things written are not insignificant, and they're certainly not dangerous. These writings do not contradict what's written in the 66 books we now call the Bible, which begs this question: if they don't contradict the Bible and they were once considered Holy Scriptures, why were they taken out? And that's a question that I do not want to endeavor to answer today. Instead, for me, I'm interested in a more personal question. If the Apocrypha writings do not contradict the Bible, and if they were once considered Holy Scriptures, why are we afraid of what people will think if we read them, own them, or study them? Mainstream denominations are preaching sermons from chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah.
And we're concerned with what they think if we study Enoch. That's absurd. Christian bookstores used to be a big business. Preachers could go there and buy sermon books. That's right. They could buy books of sermons. so they could plan out a year's worth of sermons because they got them in a book, right? Books such as The Gospel According to Andy, Opie, and Barney. Literally, books like that on shelves with study guides in case you wanted to teach, and also with sermon outlines so you could preach on the gospel according to Andy. The people who create these sermon books, the people who preach from them, and the people who hear sermons from these sermon books are the ones telling me and you that we ought not be reading the book of Enoch. Yeah. Well, I say let them keep on reading their sermon books and chicken soup for the soul, and I'm going to read the writings of a man who walked with Yahweh. Amen. And then was not. So we're going to read them, study them, and see how they are divinely intertwined together. That is to say, the 66 books we know as the Bible is divinely intertwined with Enoch, Jubilees, Maccabees, Jasher, and many others. You can no more take these writings out of our collection of Holy Scripture without doing harm than you could take fingers off of your hand and not do harm. Yeah, you'd still have a hand if some fingers were missing, but it would not have the divine order it was intended to have. Now that illustration is going to upset some folks. You just watch. But it's the truth. You cannot say we want to learn from the Holy Scriptures and remove certain books and think no harm will come from it any more than you could take fingers off your hand and think that wouldn't harm. You'd still have a hand, but not the same divine order of a hand you were meant to have. So let's go look at the divine intertwining. Go to Enoch 6, and we're going to read it again, Enoch 6 and 7. If you're reading along in the red copy here, the R.H. Charles translation, it's on page 28 and 29. It says, "It came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Shemjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin." We'll need to deal with that statement from Shemjaza, I think, before we get out of Enoch 6. Not today, but we need to deal with that. That's quite a statement he's made there. Verse 4. "And they all answered him and said, Let us swear an oath, and I'll bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders." Mike Roper and I are taking a Hebrew class on Tuesday night. If you're interested in Hebrew, I would recommend you take the class. It's taught by a rabbi, a man named Nathan Richards. I think I'm pronouncing his first name right. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, sir.
He's a delightful man and a great teacher. And he sometimes will participate in our Sabbath services through Facebook. I think that he might cringe at my pronunciation of some of these names. And I know he would do exceedingly better, but he'd be so kind as not to dare say that I was pronouncing them wrong. Instead, he would say that I'm saying it just the way they'd say it in Jerusalem. But here we go. Shemjaza, their leader, Harakabah, Ramiel, Kokabael, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Azael, Armaros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsapiel, Satarel, Turel, Jamjael, Sariel. We made it. These are the chiefs of tens. All right. Chapter 7. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Now I'm going to read from the book of Jubilees. You can buy that book individually, or you can get a big book like this off of Amazon, the complete 54 book Apocrypha, 2022 edition. I had a 2018 edition, had much smaller font. This gets up to at least an 8 font, I think. So, but if you want a copy, a compilation of all of the books of the Apocrypha, I'd recommend that one. Glenn let me know they'd come out with a 2022 edition last week, I think it was, or week before last, and so I ordered that, and I'm glad I did. But I'm going to be reading from the book of Jubilees. That is a literal standard version, and so I'll be reading that version. Here's what it says in Jubilees 4:22. And Enoch testified to the watchers who had sinned with the daughters of men, for these had begun to unite themselves so as to be defiled, and the daughters of men with the daughters of men, and Enoch testified against them all. That was just a summation, parenthetically said there in Jubilees 4 as he's talking about Enoch, but in Jubilees 5 it records this. It came to pass when the children of man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God, which in Genesis 6 is called the B'nai Ha-Elohim, saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon, and they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. And Yahweh looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all the flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said that he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of Yahweh. After having read these, is to take these passages and find out how these verses are intertwined in the Bible. First of all, Enoch 6 and 7, which we just read, and Jubilees 5, which we just read, those same stories are told where in our Bible? Genesis 6. So let's go there real quick, and we'll use that as a springboard and launch into this study. It came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the B'nai Ha-Elohim, in the Hebrew, B'nai Ha-Elohim, sons of Elohim, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when they sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. So what we immediately see when we read Genesis 6 is that Enoch and Jubilee adds details to the story that we don't find in Genesis 6. To go back to the illustration I used earlier, if I said, show me a hand, and you showed me a hand with no fingers, you would be correct. That is a hand, and I could get the idea of what a hand is. But if I said, show me a hand, and you showed me a hand that was complete with fingers, I would get a better picture of what a hand is, because a hand is supposed to also have fingers that have knuckles, that have fingertips on them, that have nails on them. So if all we have in Genesis 6 is the summation of the story, which is good, we do, then we have a hand without fingers. We don't have the knuckles and the nails. We're missing a lot of important details, is what I'm trying to say. These books are divinely intertwined. You cannot read Genesis 6 without concluding that when it was written with the expectation that you and I would know what was written in the book of Enoch and in the book of Jubilees. That we would be familiar with the details, or we would become familiar with the details that are just summarized in Genesis chapter 6. All right? So if I said, show me the story of the angelic incursion, and you hand me Genesis 6, I could see that there was an incursion. But if you wanted to give me the complete story of that incursion, you would not just need to hand me Genesis 6, you would need to make me familiar with Enoch and with the book of Jubilees. Does that make sense? Let's go look at some of those details now and see how they are laced throughout our Bibles. First, we're told that the B'nai Ha-Elohim came down and saw the daughters of men in Genesis 6. Now, if you go to a seminary, they will try to explain to you that the sons of God are who? Say again?
Of Cain.
Not of Cain, but you're right. Sons of Seth, that's correct. They will tell you that the sons of God mentioned here in Genesis 6 are the sons of Seth. But if you read the book of Enoch, Enoch makes it clear that's not who they are at all. He calls them angels to begin with, but then later on he'll also refer to them as the messengers of Elohim, and we know that the word that the word angel means messenger. So it's absurd to even consider that this is a reference to anybody other than angels. Let's go to Job chapter 1, because Job plainly will reveal to us who the B'nai Ha-Elohim are. Job 1, verse 6 says this. Now there was a day when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan came also among them. Well, that's not the sons of Seth coming to present themselves, is it? No, that's absurd. If you read the book of Enoch, you'll also see that Enoch refers to the B'nai Ha-Elohim as watchers, which is, I think, perfectly intertwined also here in Job 1:6, because Job 1:6 says there was a day when the sons of God, the sons of Elohim, came. They had been somewhere else. Now they came to present themselves. They are the watchers that Yahweh put over, watching over the affairs of man. So these are definitely angelic beings, not the human descendants of Seth. All right? So the Bible and the apocryphal writings all present to us that angels left their first estate and came down to marry the daughters of men. Genesis 6 is the hand part of the story. Jubilees and Enoch add the fingers or add the details. From the details, we cannot be deceived into believing that Genesis 6 is talking about the descendants of Seth when it refers to the sons of Elohim. Without the details, you can be deceived. With the details, they don't have a chance of deceiving you about that. Jude chapter 1 verse 6, you're familiar with that, so I'm just quickly going to go over it. But Jude 1:6 is a clear reference to information given to us in the book of Enoch. Jude 1:6 says, "And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he is reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day." So that's a reference to details given to us in the book of Enoch. 2 Peter 2:4 is a clear reference to information, details given in the book of Enoch. 2 Peter 2:4 says, "For if Yahweh spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment." Before you read further, let me ask you, what angels is he talking about? He says he spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell. What angels is he talking about? Well, verse 5 tells you which ones. "Spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly." He's talking about the angels that caused the chaos that caused Yahweh to have to destroy the earth with a flood. Those are the angels he's talking about. So it's angels who came down to marry the daughters of men, not the sons of Seth. Now look at Enoch 7 again. 7:1 says that these angels taught women something. What did the angels teach them? Charms, enchantments, cutting of roots, and plants, or with plants. So Genesis 6 and Jubilees 5 summarize all of that by saying things like the imagination of the hearts of men were evil continually. Jubilees uses the word lawless. But Enoch goes into some detail and wants us to understand that we didn't just have an unlawful marriage of these sons of Elohim with the daughters of men, but these angelic beings were teaching forbidden knowledge. Knowledge that is forbidden to know. Right? Knowledge that Yahweh doesn't want us to know or mess with. Well, is that borne out in Scripture? Let's look at Leviticus 19. We could find several other passages like this, but let's just look at this one this morning. Leviticus 19:26. You shall not eat anything with the blood. You agree with that? Neither shall you use enchantment nor observe times. Leviticus simply tells us not to use enchantments. It doesn't go into detail to explain to us where they come from, how they work, what makes them bad. It just says don't. An enchantment is the ability to whisper a spell, to prognosticate, Strong says, which is to be able to somehow create or whisper a spell that would allow you to foretell or to speak into existence a future event. Right? Leviticus says don't do that. Again, Leviticus 19 doesn't go into detail about how such a thing could be done, but it's making it plain that such a thing can be done. If it couldn't be done, it wouldn't be telling you not to do it, right? We sometimes just kind of foo-foo that kind of stuff. Just push it off as to some kind of Hollywood created, imagined thing. But Leviticus weren't Leviticus 19 is warning us to stay away from such things just as surely as it's telling us not to eat or drink blood. Both things are dangerous and both things have strong demonic origins. Enoch 7 explains to us that these enchantments come from forbidden knowledge given by the fallen sons of Elohim. Forbidden to know. The fallen ones taught it to the daughters of men. So, Leviticus says don't use enchantments. Well, where'd they come from? Well, you go to Enoch and you'll find out where they came from. Does that make sense? We need those details. Right. Exodus chapter 7 and 8 tells us that the wise men of Egypt and their magicians and their sorcerers, it's a hard word for me to say. There's a lot of words that are hard for me to say. But it tells us that they worked magic and enchantments. And when you read through the book of Exodus, it doesn't hide the fact that these men could do mighty works. Right? Yeah. Well, where did they learn how to do such things? Enoch 7 lets us know that it was passed to mankind by these B'nai Ha-Elohim. Where did the sorcerers of Egypt learn how to do what they learned how to do? By forbidden knowledge, given by fallen angels, passed down from generation to generation. We get those details out of Enoch chapter 7. So the writings of Enoch and the writings of the scriptures are divinely intertwined. Look in Numbers 24. When we were having our Hanukkah observances one night, Brian brought up some of the details of what we're about to read here. And we told these stories to his children. Numbers 24 verse 1 says this, "And when Balaam saw that it pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he went not as at other times." This is letting us know that at other times he would have done this. "But he went not as at other times to seek for enchantments. But he set his face toward the wilderness." Now if you go back to Numbers 22, what you see is Balak, the king of Moab, was trying to hire Balaam to curse Israel. He was willing to pay him great riches to cast a spell against Israel. Balaam was willing to take those riches and to cast that spell. The king of Moab knew that it could be done. Again, I think you and I have been conditioned to kind of foo-foo such a thought. Yeah. A man being able to cast a spell over a whole nation. But the king of Moab had seen Balaam at work before and knew that there were things he could do to bless somebody or to curse somebody. And he knew that Balaam was a man who understood how to cast spells and use enchantments against Israel. And Balaam, for the money he was promised, wants to demonstrate the power he has to Balak. However, Yahweh intervened. And that's the story we have in Numbers 22, where you come across a talking donkey and an angel with a flaming sword in his hand. Yahweh using them to prevent Balaam from doing a horrible deed. Numbers 24 tells us that Balaam has become frustrated with fighting against Yahweh concerning Israel. Now he's no longer going in search of enchantments like he used to. That is, in the past, he'd go find a spell. Whether it's the cutting of roots or plants, or whether it is some ancient writing, or whether he's contacting demon spirits, we don't know. But he understood that he could access power from what we might call the dark side. He could access power to put a curse on Israel. except he found out he couldn't curse what Yahweh has blessed. Well, where did such knowledge come from? It came from the sons of Elohim who left their first estate. Those are details that you get when you read the book of Enoch.
Right.
Read on in Enoch chapter 7. What I'm trying to show is that they're intertwined. And that we don't just need the summations found in Numbers and Leviticus and Genesis. We need the details that are written in the book of Enoch. In Enoch 7 verse 2, Enoch said that the women became pregnant and bare great giants. Not just giants, but great giants. It says that some of them reached heights of 3,000 nails. I'll never forget the first time I read the book of Enoch. And it said they reached heights of 3,000 nails. And I began my research to try to find out how long an ell was, how high or tall an ell was. And I got that information and I did the math. I began to experience what some call cognitive dissonance. That's defined as behavior that doesn't align with a belief, or also it can be defined as having two beliefs that contradict one another. In other words, do you believe in giants? Yes, I do. Why do you believe in giants? I believe in giants because of Goliath and because of Og of Bashan. The Bible tells me that there were giants. So, yes, I believe in giants. Do you believe in giants that might have been 3,000 ells tall? Well, that's where you begin to disconnect. Yeah. And the brain tells you that it's foolish to believe such a thing. Because you're talking about giants that could have been 450 to 4,500 feet tall, according to which manuscript you read. So even though ancient cultures tell us that there were once these hybrid beings on earth of massive size and power, massive beings that were referred to as titans, if you have a disconnect in believing that Genesis 6 is agreeing with Enoch 7, you have difficulties. To try to remove the difficulty, the cognitive dissonance, let's go to the Bible and see what the Bible tells us that might confirm what Enoch 7 is telling us. Numbers 13, and what I just said, let me repeat, is that ancient cultures record stories of hybrid beings that they knew were part human, part angelic, who were massive in size and who were endued with great power. Ancient cultures tell us that these beings existed. Well, let's see what the scriptures tell us. Numbers 13:28. These are the spies coming back from the land of Canaan, giving a report to Joshua. And here's what they say. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land. And the cities are walled and very great. They don't just have up a wall around their cities. They're very great walls. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. So the first thing they let us know is that these are not normal walls. Go home, don't do it now please, but go home and do a Google search. And look up ancient monolithic structure images. You'll see stones that defy reason. You'll see stones that are cut and used to build walls, and some of them weigh 300, 400, 700 tons, and were mined from mines miles away and brought and used to build walls with. How did they do that? Let me explain this to you, or let me say it to you this way. They weren't built by a Goliath-like creature. What was he, 10'6"? How tall was Og of Bashan? Maybe 13 feet, they estimate, 14 feet. Goliath and Og didn't take and pick up no 400, 700-ton pieces of rock and stack them in place. Right? Go look at some of these. They're still standing. It took giants of far greater size than Goliath to put these things together. Numbers tells us these aren't just walls, they're very great walls. Enoch tells us that there weren't just giants in the land, they were great giants. Back to Numbers 13. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Enoch there. Who were the children of Enoch? Exactly. Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 1. Hear, O Israel, you are to pass over Jordan this day to go in to possess nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities great and fenced up to heaven, a people great and tall, the children of the Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard say, who can stand before the children of Anak? Massive walls fenced up to heaven, and the Anakim are giants that are great and tall, and they are so renowned that the saying was, well, who can stand against the children of Anak? That's what people began to say. Amos 2:9 says this, Yahweh speaking said, yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots from beneath. Well, how? We got some giants here that are as tall as cedars. How tall are the cedars in that area? How tall are the cedars of Lebanon? Research it. 80 feet tall. Did Yahweh exaggerate to Amos? No. Did he use hyperbole? No. That Amos 2:9, you do realize where Yahweh refers to these giants as being like the height of cedars, that's written in the 66 books we have left.
Right. That's right.
Well, what else did the spies tell us? Numbers 13 verse 30. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eats up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, so we were in their sight. Preachers have been able to get away with saying that the spies were lying or exaggerating because preachers have been able to convince their people not to read the book of Enoch. But when you read the book of Enoch, you read Numbers 13 and you realize these spies are not exaggerating and they're not lying. And notice that Joshua and Caleb don't turn around and say, that's a lie.
Yeah.
Joshua and Caleb just simply say, we're well able. But they never accuse the other 10 of lying. When we take the book of Enoch and we set it beside and let it intertwine with our Bible, we understand that these men are telling the truth. Right? Because of Enoch, we understand that these men really did encounter some giants who were so great, it made them feel like and look like grasshoppers. You would not feel like a grasshopper against Goliath. You might feel intimidated. You might even be afraid, but not like a grasshopper. But a giant that was as tall as a cedar, or one who stood either 300 or 3,000 ells tall,
Yeah.
that's bigger than a grasshopper. Right? How would it feel in my presence?
Yeah.
Right? That's what the men are saying. We saw being so tall that we were as grasshoppers before them. To have that point in the right direction. Doesn't matter. All right. Listen to Enoch 7:3. They consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. The spies said in Numbers 13, the land we went through eats up its inhabitants. Are they agreeing?
Yeah.
Enoch 7 and Numbers 13 spies, they're agreeing. They are intertwined. Enoch 7:3 said the giants consumed all the acquisitions of men. If you had cows or sheep or goats or camels or horses, the giants ate them. And then, when you didn't have any more of those, they ate you. The spies are saying it as well. The spies are saying, if we go in there, whatever we have or whatever we try to grow is going to be taken from us and consumed by these gigantic beings. And if we run out of food, they consume us. Now, either we believe the Bible or not. The language of Numbers 13 and Amos 2 are such that we can pretend that it doesn't say what it says if we choose to. Let me say it again. The language of Numbers 13 and Amos 2 are such that we can pretend that it doesn't say what it says if we want to. But when you bring alongside Numbers 13, Enoch chapter 7, then you see that these passages are telling the same story and that they are talking about great giants that exceed our ability to imagine. These books are divinely intertwined and should not be separated. To read Numbers 13 without reading Enoch 7 would be like having a hand and thinking that you didn't need any fingers to make it complete. And then in Enoch 7, Enoch tells us that they sinned against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish and became cannibalistic. Jubilees 5 tells us that all flesh corrupted its way. It says men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth alike. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other. All that Genesis 6 told us was this. Genesis 6:7, and Yahweh said, I'll destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man, beast, the creeping thing, the fowls of the air, for it repents me that I've made them. So Genesis 6 isn't just a story of men sinning. It's the record of how hybrid beings cause plants and animals and fish and birds to all become corrupted. So much so that it all had to be destroyed. It wasn't just a matter of destroying men. Everything had to be destroyed because Jubilees and Enoch make it plain that this corruption even affected animal and plant life. So to read about the flood covering the whole earth in Genesis 6 without reading in Enoch and Jubilees about how the plants and animals were corrupted is like being willing, again, to have a hand without fingers. There's so many important details that we would miss if we didn't have these books. We should not be hesitant at any time or embarrassed that we've chosen to take back and read and study what was once taken away and hidden.
True.
There are details within these books that we need because they will protect us from unethical religious leaders who could and would deceive us with false doctrine if we didn't have these details.
Amen.
They take these details out and hide them. And then what they leave, they can create false doctrine around that if you don't have the details.
Right.
We need the details.
Amen.
So we're going to dive back into our study of the book of Enoch, and we'll begin that next Sabbath as well. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. His name is put upon you. He shall bless you.